Well, great. Thank you all so much for joining. My name is Jessica Klein. I'm a policy associate with Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that does research, advocacy, and communications to make the lives of Kentuckians healthier and help them thrive. And we do that by covering a lot of different topics, but the one I focus on is the safety net. So today I'll be talking a lot about our food safety net and what we can do in terms of advocacy this year and moving forward to protect our food safety net. I'm not going to do a round of introductions because there is a lot of content to go through today. But please feel free to put your name if you're with an organization and your location in the chat. That'll kind of give us all a good idea of where everybody's coming from. And if you do have questions throughout the presentation, you can feel free to put those in the chat as well. Robin's going to help me go through there, but you can also feel free to save those for the end, and we'll have a little more time to go in depth on anything I missed during that time. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see if everybody can see it. There we go. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about why we need our food safety net first. So there are 1 in 7 Kentuckians that are food insecure. That means that they don't have consistent access to enough food to live a healthy life and to thrive in their life. So that's over 700,000 Kentuckians and over 200,000 Kentucky kids. We also rank nationally for food insecurity in our older adult population. Over 13% of those 50 to 59 face food insecurity. We also have 10 of the top 25 counties nationally in terms of worst food insecurity. So we're not doing great. And those are Wolf, McGoffin, Owsley, Breathitt, Leslie, Harlan, Lee, Knox, Clay, and Letcher. So definitely a lot of room for growth in terms of addressing food insecurity in Kentucky. And this is based on 2022 data. It is the most recent food insecurity survey data we have from Feeding America. So what do we do to address food insecurity, and what is our food safety net? So I'm going to be talking about the food assistance programs that help to end food insecurity. But our food safety net really goes beyond that, right? Because we also have a lot of different food supports and feeding programs in schools, churches. There's also farmer supports for growing, for our full food system, for growing food in Kentucky through our Department of Agriculture, but a little bit more on the food assistance programs themselves. So we have the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program that was previously called food stamps, and the income limit for that is 200% of the poverty line. You also have to have citizenship to participate in that program. We have the Women, Infants, and Children program. That's for breastfeeding or postpartum moms and kids under 6. There is an income limit for that as well, and we reach actually only about 56% of those eligible in Kentucky. It's over 100,000 people. And our biggest reach is to infants with that program. And then we have the National School Lunch Program, an income limit for that as well. But many schools participate in programs that allow them to provide free school meals to all of their students based on a percentage of their population reaching this income limit. And then we have the Summer Electronic Benefits Transfer Program, Summer EBT, which was newly implemented in the last year, that provides meals during the summer. It's actually grocery money on a card to make up for kids missing out on those school meals that they really rely on during the school year. So these are all of our food assistance programs. I'm happy to talk about any of these. I love all of these programs, and we need all of them, right? Because there are different applications, income guidelines, and requirements that go along with all of these programs. Some of them only operate during certain times of the year. So really, we need all of these benefits to make sure that we're reaching as many people in Kentucky as we can to address that food insecurity issue that we have. But today I'm going to talk about the program that's received the most hesitation, the most really aggressive attacks over the past 5 years in our Kentucky legislature, and that is the SNAP program, or previously food stamps. So here's a little overview of what the SNAP program is. The SNAP program provides grocery money on an EBT card, and we reach over 586,000 people in Kentucky. That's over 12% of our population. Again, not reaching that full 15.7% that are food insecure and might meet the income guidelines of this program. And the benefits are quickly spent, right? Because people buy groceries, weekly, monthly basis. So that money is quickly spent in local communities, which is great news because that means the program really brings in that economic stimulus at the community level when those benefits are spent quickly at farmers markets and retailers. The program is also very receptive to policy change. And you can see that in this chart here. We have a lot of changes in participation rates over the years. 2013 is really when we recovered from the recession, and that's why you see it start to decline since that point. But a lot of the dips between 2016 and 2020 are from policy change that happened under the Bevin administration. And that little gap was due to a government shutdown. There's also a sharp increase in 2020, which you can see and guess that is related to the economic response from the pandemic. And then a dip once again once we recovered from that. So in terms of participation, we are reaching a lot of Kentuckians. A lot of Kentuckians do receive help with their groceries from this program, but again, we're only reaching about 65% of those that are eligible. And again, that is mostly because of policy decisions. So hunger is a policy choice. So who are the Kentuckians that are receiving these benefits? Again, only reaching about 65%, but there are a growing number of those that are older adults. So nationally, 48% of SNAP households include seniors over the age of 50. The majority of those older adult households are single-person households, so households of one. And nationally, this group is also a group that is working if they're able. That means that they don't have young kids at home, they're not a student, they're not an older adult, and they're not a person with a disability. But we do also serve and reach people with disabilities and working families with children. So those are the key groups of people that are reaching SNAP. And I know that there are a lot of myths around, who's deserving of this food assistance and who uses the program. So I wanted to kind of say that this is who uses it. It's older adults, it's working families, and it's people with disabilities. And the benefits of SNAP are, it has been proven to improve health and economic stability. Having food is super important to our health. The more access we have to food, the better our health choices are. And I think it's extremely important for specifically children under the age of 5 and older adults to have consistent access to food. And that is very tied to their health outcomes. And in terms of economic stability as well, because we know people perform better and are healthier, more able to go to work or school and fully participate when they're not hungry. Another benefit is for every $1 spent in SNAP, it generates almost $2 in economic activity. I mentioned that people are using this money quickly when they get it. So we know that it is spent quickly and is generating that economic activity in local communities. And for every 9 meals provided by SNAP, that's equivalent to 1 provided by a food bank. So a lot of we 100% need our food banks as emergency sources of food, which is the role that they play. But I know some people, when talking about SNAP, really rely on food banks to solve all of our food insecurity problems. And the truth is that our food banks are a huge resource, but they cannot meet the need of that full food insecurity issue and address all of hunger in Kentucky. So we need SNAP as well as those other food assistance supports to play that role as well. So I mentioned we've had multiple bills the past 5 years attacking the SNAP program as well as some other assistance programs, cash assistance and Medicaid as well. And they've done this in a lot of different ways, and I'm going to go through those, but I really want to focus on House Bill 7 and House Bill 367 in the past few years. So House Bill 7 did pass. I am going to talk a little bit about it. But I think you may have been part of the advocacy of some of these policies in the past too, and I think there's been a huge success in terms of mitigating the harm that could be caused by policies that impacted SNAP. And yeah, with House Bill 7, advocates did a really great job of mitigating that harm. With House Bill 367, we were successful in defeating it as well. So since we defeated it last year, we are hearing that we are likely going to have another version in the next legislative session, which is why I want to focus on providing you all with the information you would need to advocate against any bills that would harm SNAP and its participants in the next year. So far, what we've been hearing is that it may have components from the same bill as last year. So I am going to go through those, as well as mention some other threats that we've seen nationally to SNAP. And many of those threats come from the same organization that kind of shops around different model policies to different states with the kind of same messages over and over again. It is not tailored to each state. And that's the FGA, the Foundation for Government Accountability. And that's where the past few bills have come from, definitely 367. So I'll be talking about the harms from those bills, but also a few others that FGA have shopped around to other states so that we can be prepared for whatever may come in this model legislation in the next year. So with 367, that would have taken SNAP away from over 64,000 Kentuckians, and that's primarily kids and older adults. There are 2 ways that it would have done that. The first is eliminating what's called BBCE, broad-based categorical eligibility. Now, this is where I really get into the nitty-gritty of SNAP policy, and it's meant to be confusing. So please feel free to ask questions about the specific SNAP policies that I'm going to refer to here. But a little bit about eliminating BBCE. This is the categorical eligibility that says that people that participate in one program like TANF, which is our cash assistance program in Kentucky, they automatically, because they qualify for this program, meet the income guidelines to participate in SNAP. So instead of having them complete additional applications and going through verifications of that information again, because they've already done that with a previous program, they can be considered eligible and receive the second program without having to duplicate information. So we utilize BBC, and actually the majority of SNAP households utilize BBCE to participate in another program. So this ending BBCE would eliminate our ability to do that. And it does a few other things as well. So eliminating that requires a higher income limit for SNAP. That means fewer people can be eligible for SNAP because of the income limit. It also creates an asset test, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But what an asset test does is it has additional requirements in terms of things you can have in the bank in terms of savings, family vehicles, family land, those types of things would count in that calculation for SNAP as income and determining your eligibility. And this, I'm getting a few questions in the chat about how this would impact other programs. So a little bit, this does change your ability to qualify for other programs like school meals and childcare meals. So I will talk a little bit more about that. The second way that 367 would have taken away SNAP from families is eliminating the work reporting requirement waiver. So what this waiver is a waiver that allows counties with high enough and the unemployment rates and who meet certain economic requirements to waive the reporting requirement for people who are adults between the ages of 18 to 54 without a dependent or a person with a disability in their home. So currently, there are counties that are required to do this work reporting. What we know is that this work reporting does not improve the majority of work outcomes, but what it does do is create barriers to participating in the program. So these waivers really pinpoint areas that meet the economic guidelines and waive them from having to do this additional paperwork that we know takes away benefits. So a little bit more about this BBCE. Again, this is a standard option that Kentucky implements along with 44 other states. So the majority of states utilize BBCE to make sure that people are able to access SNAP. And eliminating BBCE could really worsen hardship in 3 ways, and that is it threatens that food assistance for particularly seniors, people with disabilities, and families with savings. Because it has that asset test component and increases the guideline of income. The second, it puts free school and childcare meals at risk of elimination. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And it also exacerbates the benefits cliff. And I'll explain that as well. So about the population that would be impacted by this. Again, changing that income limit to you have to have a higher income and you can't have savings. You can't have that additional family land. All of those things would start to count against you in terms of qualifying, but also in terms of the amount of benefits that you can qualify for. So it really is punishing people who are saving for the future. Good question, chat, about administrative costs. So in addition to making it easier for people who are applying for these programs, it also eliminates that duplication in terms of administrative work because it does kind of, you don't have to manage one, calculating assets, so finding the calculation of the value of a vehicle and those types of things. But two, the additional applications in terms of having to apply for multiple programs when you qualify categorically for multiple.
See that Tyler has his hand up.
Tyler, what's up?
Yeah, hey y'all, sorry for getting on late. Tyler Offerman, he, they pronouns at the Kentucky Equal Justice Center. And I guess I just want to make the point that BBC wasn't always available. I think only about 20 years ago was this created by Congress as an option. So 20 years ago, no states used this. And then slowly 44 have because they realized the exact points Jessica's making. But I have heard horror stories from DCBS workers about having to have a copy of the Kelly Blue Book on their desk and then try and figure out, what is a 1993 Saturn with a bad axle worth. Like it's a total suck on worker time, and vehicles are one of the things. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of assets that count, and if you get into like what is your family's funeral plot worth, like it gets very complicated for workers.
Thanks, Tyler, for adding that. I think we can all kind of imagine some of the assets that we hold that might qualify. And I think when we start to think too about like who specifically would be impacted by that asset test, again, older adults immediately come to mind because they kind of, those that don't have an income rely on those assets that they built up over their lifetime and to weather hard times. So that's definitely a group that would be impacted, as well as those working families that are trying to accrue savings in order to, again, weather hard times or to build assets over their family's lifetime.
There's a question here about what's driving the non-participation for SNAP. I don't know if that's something that you're going to get into in a little bit.
I was a little bit done talking about participation, but in terms of like who we're not reaching, there are a lot of groups that we're not reaching. I think a lot of people that reach what I hear frequently from people who help with SNAP outreach is that those that qualify for the minimum amount often don't feel it's worth it to go through all of the paperwork and administrative pieces of managing SNAP for the what is it, $23 that you would receive a month for food assistance.
I
So
think it's 28 now, but yeah.
28? Yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons. But there are probably more groups, yeah, that we're missing.
Yeah, Grant, and if it is helpful, we've tried to figure this out. For instance, New Mexico has a 99% participation rate, and as of 10 or 15 years ago, they were closer to us. So it's like, what did they do? There are a lot of programmatic things which Jessica's pointing to, which we continue to work on. And part of it is the like psychology of the humans that live here.
Yeah.
And that gets really tricky. I mean, folks in the mountains who have like had to go it their own for a long time and feel like the state and systems don't care about them, or like pride. Those are just like hard to calculate.
And hard to
But
address. Yeah.
yeah, but it is something we see regularly. Like, yeah, I need help, but I was raised to not ask for help, kind of stuff, and that's hard.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Great. Well, the next impact of eliminating BBCE would be an impact to free school meals and childcare meals. And really the impact of BBC overall, eliminating it would take SNAP away from 21,000 kids. And what that does is impact their school's ability to apply for free school meals for all students. Because we know when kids qualify for SNAP, they can easily qualify for other programs, and schools and childcare also use that percentage to apply for these other programs. So this is an example, this chart is, of childcare centers that utilize SNAP participation to participate in the child and adult care feeding program. And even just the food reimbursement that those child care centers can receive for children that participate in SNAP is far different than those who don't participate. So this has a huge impact on schools being able to provide meals, but also childcare centers to be able to provide meals and the cost of those meals. When we know that childcares are already facing all of these other changes, and schools are as well, that impact their budgets. So this would have a huge impact on school meals, so students that are receiving meals, but also the schools and childcare centers that are providing them. And then the third impact of eliminating BBCE is that it would exacerbate the benefits cliff. So again, this is the jargon that I'm going to get into. So if you've been following along in our state legislature, one of the things we talk about is the benefits cliff in these safety net programs. And basically what the cliff is that at some point when you earn enough, you drop off from the program, right? So SNAP benefits gradually phase out as your earnings rise. So if you make more money one year, then you receive fewer and fewer benefits based on that income. And then there are policies that can impact that cliff, though, so that can make it sharper for some families. So this is an example from Hawaii, who has eliminated BBCE. They do not have a BBCE program. And you can kind of see that the change in that, that net income impacts the amount of SNAP benefits that they can receive. So it's a sharper kind of drop off point for people based on their income. And in terms of the amount of benefits that they can receive through SNAP. And what that is in reality is that you know, people kind of start to fear at some point making more money because they're going to face this cliff. And that's what we've heard from states like Hawaii, the few states that don't have a BBCE program, is that there is kind of like this sharp drop off point for families. So I talked a lot about that BBCE, that categorical eligibility piece, but I do want to talk about the second piece and threat from 367, which was the elimination of those waivers from work reporting requirements. Eliminating these waivers in counties with high joblessness punishes people who are looking for jobs in poor areas or areas without jobs. So these are the counties from 2024 that participated in the waiver program. Currently, we just submitted a waiver that was approved for 117 counties. So that's even more counties than this map that have waived this additional reporting. So if we were to eliminate that now, that's even more counties and even more people, so tens of thousands of people. And with the 117 counties, that's potentially hundreds of thousands of people that would be impacted by eliminating this waiver, having to do that additional paperwork every month in order to keep their benefits. So we would hate to see that. So moving on from 367, last year there was also a bill around mandatory SNAP employment and training. The SNAP employment and training program is a program that provides kind of a pathway to employment and training programs, as well as $20 in transportation to those programs. And the employment and training also counts towards that work reporting requirement. So the bill from last year would have made it mandatory to participate in this program. And we know that our current program is not capable of providing employment and training for all 500, 600,000 people who participate in the SNAP program. I think currently less than 30 people participate in employment and training. There isn't as many supports we would like to see in employment and training either. We would love to see, you know, childcare support, transportation, internet access, many different supports that help people get to work in this employment and training program. So this is something I wouldn't be surprised if we saw again this year or in the future. FGA and those other groups often sell it as a way to lift people out of poverty or inspire them to get back to work because they're not inspired enough. that they need food assistance, and somehow they're still not inspired enough to get to work. And what we know is it actually is a way of expanding that work reporting to all staff participants. So it would include parents and people over 60. Basically by making this mandatory says that they have to do this employment training at 30 hours per month in order to receive their food benefits. So their food assistance really becomes dependent on this additional paperwork and participation in a program that does not have capacity to reach every county in Kentucky. And there are many alternatives that we could see in terms of improving Kentucky's SNAP E&T program that wouldn't take away grocery money from Kentuckians. So we've made a lot of recommendations this year. I know Tyler's done a lot of work on this in terms of, what additional supports could our SNAP E&T program provide? Again, childcare, internet access, those kinds of things. And there were kind of a pilot of that in 2016 that we saw be successful. So we would love to see those additional supports and additional funding go into this program to make it better. Also, virtual options is something we've heard. Increased partnerships, further connection with our community and technical schools. Again, many ways we can improve the SNAP E&T program that wouldn't take away grocery money from Kentuckians, but making it mandatory is not the solution. So I would not be surprised if we saw a similar version of this. And what we want to really point to is that there are many ways we can support people to get to work, but making mandatory participation in this additional paperwork barriers is not the way to do it. So what are the additional threats that we might see? So those are the three from last year, but there are many more that we've seen in the past and many that we could see again in the future. So these are the continued threats to the SNAP program that we've seen in other states and previously in Kentucky. So the first, and I'm going to go through each one because again, I know this is using a lot of jargon and really getting into the specifics of the SNAP policies. But I do want people to be familiar with what some of those threats could be so that we can start to prepare ourselves for any advocacy that we need to do to protect this SNAP program. So the first is enhanced verification or change reporting. This is something we saw a version of this in House Bill 7 a few years ago. This requires additional paperwork. You have to submit frequent eligibility information, that kind of thing. It's often sold as, stopping welfare scams because we make sure that people are eligible multiple times a year. With change reporting, it was that there was a 10-day limit with any change in your life that you had to report that and basically reapply within 10 days of having a baby, 10 days of having a car accident, 10 days of losing your job. So really that restriction would have a huge impact on one, again, getting back to that administrative work of having to get that information, but also like the stress and pressure of having to report changes within 10 days. Change reporting is already required. People do have to report those types of changes. It's just not with such a strict timeline and with all the additional paperwork requirement. The next one is nutrition requirements. We sometimes hear this as sold as like making SNAP healthier or making sure people, poor people are buying the right things with their food assistance that we're paying for and those kinds of things. That's kind of what we've heard it sold as. But what we know is that this is actually restricting the options that people can spend their SNAP benefits on. And it really limits how people can spend those benefits. It's also very difficult for retailers and food providers to adjust to any changes in nutrition requirements. We also know that just a huge part of food choice is more related to like the behavioral science of how stores are laid out and the affordability and availability of fresh foods at corner stores and food retailers that people are spending their benefits at. So there are a lot of ways we can improve nutrition, but nutrition requirements on SNAP benefits is not the best way to do that. Photo IDs on EBT cards. Again, this is one that we've seen, maybe it was 2019, maybe around then, 2022 maybe, on some legislation in Kentucky. So it would require retailers to confirm who's using an EBT card based on a photo on the card. This is, again, people who use SNAP benefits, it's for their whole household. So for people with more than one person in their household, you know, it's like, whose photo do I put on the card? What if I ask my my spouse to use the card at the grocery store and my picture's on it? So the research shows is that it doesn't address fraud, which is how this particular piece is sold as a way to prevent fraud, is to make sure that the photo ID matches the person on the card. But the research shows that it doesn't address fraud and actually just makes it more difficult for households to use this to get groceries. The next is child support payment requirements. So these are requirements that require parents, whether they have custody or not of their children, to participate in child support through official means. And this can look several different ways. So currently in Kentucky, we have a partial ban on child support, which means that basically non-custodial parents have to participate. But this could be expanded to include custodial parents. And what that does is kind of negate any informal agreements that families have to say that you have to identify that your co-parent is participating and providing support, and really kind of turn them in if they're not, in order for you to keep your food benefits. And what we know is that does nothing to improve either parent's budget and their ability to provide, one, child support, or two, food to children, whether or not they live in their home. So this has been sold from FGA and like-minded folks as kind of a way to get to self-sufficiency, or really a punishment for deadbeat dads. But what we know is that, again, it does nothing to improve the family's budget or their ability to pay for either of these things. Okay, and the final threat to SNAP I want to mention is additional red flags in our fraud system. So what this would do is create additional automatic triggers for fraud claims. And what it ultimately results in is more people losing their benefits. I know again, Tyler has a lot of examples of kind of some of the current red flags, but it's things like using the wrong PIN number, or going to the store multiple times in a row. Say you forgot an ingredient, you have to go back to the store and you want to use your card again. Well, in Kentucky, that might be count as a red flag for fraud, and you might be charged with fraud in the SNAP program for doing things like that. So we've seen efforts in other states to create more of these red flags. I think they're kind of sold as like, oh, this is part of a calculation, but it has become more of an automatic system. So we would not like to see things that we all do, right? Like, I enter the wrong PIN number all the time. And I forget things from the grocery store all the time. So don't want to see those become used against people in their SNAP benefits, or to create fear amongst people that are using the SNAP program. Yeah, Tyler made a good point in the chat that these algorithms for the red flags are behaviors that are shopping while poor, because they were built by people who've never lived in poverty, and they haven't had to kind of go through some of the same things that people who are using these benefits and how they use them. So yes, I will move on. So I know we've talked a lot about these really kind of scary and negative things with the SNAP program, but I do want to go through a little bit of how we can all work together in messaging and advocacy over the next year as these threats come along. I think advocates in Kentucky have done an amazing job in defeating a lot of these threats in the past. They've also done an amazing job to, again, mitigate those harms in bills that have passed and really bring to light the value of the program. And again, those benefits like health and economic stability that it can create. Obviously, our message isn't getting quite across because there's still these threats that are coming. So I think there's more that we can do together to really connect like the real lives of people to the data that we're seeing and really make a strong case for the SNAP program this year. So I want to share a little bit of kind of our perspective on the messaging and kind of what you can expect from myself at KyPolicy, but also all of KFAN, the Kentucky Food Action Network, in terms of supports to defend this program, but also the other food safety net programs throughout the year. So in terms of communications and messaging on the program and these issues, a little bit of background on the perspective that we have seen work. So this is what we know works across the nation in terms of messaging around food assistance programs, and that is to connect the problem to a value that we all agree on. So you might have seen this before. It's called BPSA messaging. So you bring a value, so a shared value that we all have. You connect it to the problem and really explain like what the problem is, and then transition to how it can be solved, and then provide specific examples. So an example of this is a value would be, we all agree that people deserve to have enough food to eat and thrive. The problem, but 15.7% of Kentuckians are food insecure. And we know that the SNAP program provides grocery money that can quickly be spent in communities and provide people with food. So please protect the action would be, please vote no on this bill that would take away food assistance through the SNAP program to hundreds of thousands of Kentuckians that participate. So this is the type of messaging you will see from us. Again, it's connecting values that we agree on and put forth in terms of protecting these programs to the problem and a solution and action. So that's the type of messaging you will see from us and that we recommend you use. We've seen it work nationally with these programs. And what you can really expect from us is, again, from KyPolicy, an analysis of the policy and its potential impacts, who will be hurt by these policies and how, and really that explanation, the relevant data of who specifically and what counties will be impacted. And from KFAN, you can expect things like shared talking points, advocacy tools like one-pagers or charts, who to call, that type of thing, and opportunities to share your message. So there are lots of ways to do that, and I'll talk about that, but that can be from anything from testimony to co-writing an op-ed to just sharing a handout with a coworker or a friend or a church group, that kind of thing. So lots of different ways to get involved in this messaging and advocacy, but that's kind of what you can expect from KFAN in the next year in terms of supports. We also, I believe, are going to send out kind of weekly updates on all of our food policy priorities, but specifically safety net as well. So if this is something you're interested in, definitely make sure you're connected to us to receive that information. A little bit more on the advocacy side. So in addition to sharing messaging with media or online, you can really get involved in advocacy this year if this is something you're interested in. And when I say advocacy, I really want to explain for anybody that's not allowed to do advocacy, that there is a difference between advocacy and lobbying. There are many different ways to educate and inform decision makers lobbying is just one of those. So yeah, sharing information, research, and analysis is one way. That's kind of the bigger umbrella. Normally, people who are in positions that can't lobby are able to educate decision makers or people they work with. But if you are with an organization that has restrictions on that, I would double check on what information you could share from your organization or the clients you work with, that type of thing, when you're sharing education or research. Advocacy is so talking to different decision makers, yeah, health departments, administrators of these programs, or even legislators who make decisions about these types of policies, about the programs, and again, doing that education piece. And lobbying is more of the specifics of voting on it and taking action on a specific bill. So just wanted to share that there are lots of different ways to advocate, even if you're not able to lobby. And we will be doing a lot of that advocacy and invite you to join KFAN and to be part of that advocacy. I know some of you have been in the past. I just wanted to share, like, if this is a starting point for you, these are the committees that have been involved in SNAP policy in the past. So even just getting familiar with these different committees might be a starting point. You can check who your legislator is and then see if they participate in one of these committees. That is one way to kind of start off. But again, a few examples. So you can reach out to your legislator and talk to them about hunger. You could invite them to learn more about your program, and how you would like to see them involved in as an anti-hunger champion. You can forward KFAN calls to action or emails to any networks that you work with, or social media posts on your social media accounts. You can share our information or handouts, one-pagers, or research with your coworkers, your friends, a church group that you belong to, neighbors, anybody you think that would be interested in the information or it could impact them. And more specifically, like, you can sign on to letters we send out. You can call the legislative hotline if you don't want to, if you're not sure who your legislator is, or kind of want to go through that, you can call the hotline and go to a specific committee that I've kind of outlined there. If you're more inclined on the writing side, or have an experience to share, you could write an op-ed or speak to media about your story and how it's related to some of these issues in the next few months. And if you're interested in any of those things, you can reach out to a KFAN staff member. My email's at the end of this, so you can reach out to me specifically or Robin. I'm more happy to connect you to some of these opportunities, but also can help guide you in any of that type of work that you want to do. So if you're not able to do some of that advocacy, what you can do is just hear from any coworkers, friends, clients that you work with about these issues and share them back with us. We have a child and adult feeding work group that meets regularly about these types of programs. And we love to hear from others on specific things that they're hearing in terms of SNAP, like who's being impacted by what. And that really gives us information in terms of like shaping our message and our information. So love to hear from you all who have more experience with people who participate in these programs to share that with me. So I do have links in here. I know we are going to send out these slides. So there are links in here to find your legislator if you're not sure already. You can type in your address and that'll give you specifically who your senator and representative is. There's also a link to our KFAN website, and on there you can find the sign up for our emails, but also links to social media. And then there's opportunities with the Thrive Kentucky Coalition that KFAN is a member of to learn throughout the year. So they have webinars and in-person presentations throughout the year that provide policy updates on food assistance programs, but all of the safety net. So healthcare, housing, all of those things as well. And I know that there are questions at the chat, but one motivational thing for us to end on. So Who knows what this is? Does anybody know what this is a picture of? I don't see anything in the chat. Okay, a boat. Thank you, Cody.
Is this the
This
scene
is a
from Free
boat.
Willy?
This is also an orca. So I think we can all take the mindset of the orcas over the past year. You know, they're fighting back. They're not just taking it anymore. We're seeing that the orcas fight back, and I think that that's a mindset I'm ready to take on. I hope you all are too. Of you know, we're not just going to sit back and take it. It's been 5 years that we keep hearing this. We're not going to stop. Advocates that support this program and the participants of these programs don't want to see them affected by all of these paperwork changes and policies that are going to have really bad impacts. So I hope that you all feel a little bit more informed to be a part of that fight. Here is my email, but I do want to address some of the questions in the comments. But while I'm looking for those, if anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, now is a good time to do that.
I have one to get us started.
Great.
You showed us the different bills that had been brought up in different years, and I noticed there were a couple years where there was not some sort of anti-SNAP bill brought up. Why do you think that is? Were they just preparing for like a bigger one the next year? Or was FGA kind of absent and so they weren't like propelled to do it?
Well, one of those was the session ended early from COVID. The other was we did see and maybe I should have put it in there, but some administrative bills that would have impacted the SNAP program, but didn't name SNAP specifically. So they impacted more the administration of these programs. So things like staff pay, staff time. I think there was one on, yeah, the child support piece, which was filed as like a deficient administrative policy. So there were some that were more of on the administration of the program side, and I did not include those because they're not specifically like the FGA model bills. So those were specifically pertaining to the model bill. So I don't think it was like a huge shift in messaging or anything that changed. But maybe I don't know if it was like FGA's presence or if we were just so loud that we scared them off. I'm not sure, but
That can
yeah,
be
I
the
think
reason next year.
that would be great. Yeah, slow it down a little bit at least. Let's see. Okay. You know, Stacy, I know you asked me a specific question. I'm having trouble finding it. I'm wondering if you could ask me again out loud what your question was. Okay. I can't find it, Stacy, but I'll definitely get back to you.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that one was just to you because I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, it was. It said, "Thank you. You're fine." Stacy doesn't have a mic, so she typed it to me again. Thank you, Stacy. So will the bill eliminate verification processes for non-CEP school districts? So that was with the broad-based categorical eligibility, that BBCE piece. I talked about how it might impact schools that participate in the programs that allow them to provide school meals to everyone. That's called CEP. So she's asking about schools that don't participate in CEP, if they would be impacted. And I think, yeah, the answer is it impacts individual students at that point in terms of their ability to apply for the National Free School Lunch Program. So if you have an National Free School Lunch Program, even if you don't participate in CEP, your individual students would be impacted in terms of like being categorically eligible for that program based on their SNAP participation. I just mentioned the CEP because that really impacts a whole school's ability to reach more students. So I think both have an impact is the answer. Thank you for that question. Okay. And then, yeah, just to name the fraud rate out loud. So Sarah asked about fraud rates, and aren't they wildly low? And isn't that a big myth with these programs? Could you direct us towards any studies about that? Yes, Tyler and I have taken a good look at the fraud rate in Kentucky. And there are several different types of fraud that are listed out in that. I know Tyler has the specifics, but it's, yeah, between 0.25% to 1% of that kind of intentional fraud that we see in the program. So it's not very much. And I think that that's often pointed to, but the type of fraud we do see very frequently is called EBT theft or skimming. And that's basically like credit card skimming on EBT cards. And that's a national issue. We would like to see the SNAP program refund benefits that were lost through skimming. That's something that was provided the past few years. And we would love to see that continued. So that's something we're looking to be included in the Farm Bill at the federal level to address the real type of fraud that we do see in the program, which is skimming of benefits from people through credit card fraud.
That's one of the reasons we want to move to chip cards, right?
Yeah, chip cards are kind of the protection from that type of fraud. And I will say, today I focused on Kentucky state policy, but there are a lot of SNAP policies at the federal level that we're tracking as well. And I think with the new administration starting January 20th, we will see more information about their SNAP policy through the budget, but also through the Farm Bill that's being negotiated at the moment. So there will be a lot more on the federal level this year than we've seen in the past for Kentucky to have a voice on. So if that's also something you're interested in, we have a Farm Bill campaign group you can email Robin about, but we also provide updates on that federal advocacy to the full KFAN network as well. What additional questions do you all have? Thank you, Rosie. I didn't mention it. Okay, so the Hunger Free Kentucky Day on February 18th is Feeding Kentucky's Advocacy Action Day, and they're going to have lobby meetings and kind of I think they usually have a kind of convening that goes along with that. So if this is your first year doing this type of advocacy, I definitely recommend coming in February to that Hunger Free Kentucky Day. It's a good way to dip your toe into the advocacy space, and you can connect with our KFAN partner, Feeding Kentucky, on that day. The information is on their website, and we can be sure to share that link in the follow-up email as well with more information on how to sign up for that day. So yeah, definitely a good opportunity to get engaged if this is your first time doing advocacy.
And as most people who have heard me talk about SNAP know, I will get on the soapbox about fraud in the program. But Jessica made a good connection, and that's one of the messages I know we've been trying to use a lot. Like, there is fraud in these programs, but it's not the people on the programs, it's the people stealing from the people on the programs. And you know, there's other sort of nuances to it, but that's like the most straightforward message, and one that seems to, I think, find the most common ground amongst the people who are concerned about, you know, what we call program integrity. But in talking to the staff at the program integrity branch of the cabinet, they spend about 80 to 90% of their time now tracking the theft of benefits from vulnerable Kentuckians. So, you know, if your goal is to make sure those people are quote unquote like finding the bad people, they literally can't do it right now. They don't even have the time and capacity. But yeah, even more so, very few people, less than 1,000 people a year out of the 600,000 that are on SNAP intentionally commit, lying about how much they make, or because it is broken into two big buckets, right? There's the fraud, you're intentionally lying, but then there's the trafficking. And I could go on a separate soapbox about like, we have cut the ability for people to get cash assistance. So if someone wants to sell their groceries for cash because they need to buy asthma medication for their kids, like, I don't know. To me, there's like a moral argument there, but it is illegal based on the program parameters to sell the food you buy with SNAP for any cash. But even still, again, instances are very low. The thing that happens most is that workers screw up. There's usually about 10,000 instances or more per year. So about 10 times the amount of individuals lying where the worker accidentally adds a zero, right? So instead of $1,000 a month, you're suddenly making $10,000 a month, right? Or, vice versa. So anyways, it can be complicated, but I think it's easiest to stick to that message as far as there is fraud, but it's people stealing from these people. And of the folks that are committing quote unquote fraud, less than 1%. And, by creating these huge bureaucratic systems, which Jessica's been speaking to with paperwork and requirements, like you're actually kicking people off the program. You're kicking more people off than you are catching the quote unquote bad actors.
And I think that's really the point I want to drive home, Tyler, is like, sure, there is some fraud. Maybe some of it's detected. I know some people have experiences with it. And so I don't want to like negate the idea that the fraud exists, because it totally does. It just might not be at the rate that it's being said that it's at currently. But I think the big point is like when we're trying to reach this like 1% of people, we're kicking tens of thousands of additional people who aren't committing fraud off of the program because of all of these additional barriers that we're creating. And I think that that's the really point that I wanted to drive home. Ooh, Chelsea's wondering if we have data on the overpayments from DCBS errors. Tyler recently made a very large fraud data request to DCBS. So once we have some more information on that analysis, he and I are going to work together, kind of put that together to help make sure that we're all pretty informed about the fraud issue. So I'm happy to share more information once we get a lot of that up-to-date data back. Cool. Of course. I know we have a few more minutes, and I am seeing a lot of names on the calls of people who have participated in a lot of this advocacy in the past. So I just wanted to kind of open the floor if there's anything you wanted to share from your experience last year, something you did that you thought was really helpful, or you're looking forward to doing and not looking forward to doing again. But yeah, any experiences you want to share from your work last year? I mean, a lot of folks on the call have done really amazing work in this advocacy. So is there anything you want to share? You don't have to. Just thought I'd open the floor.
Something that's not just safety net related, but something I would like to see us consider this year is trying to make sure our message is really widespread and having maybe a member from like each district try to reach out and contact. And, that's going to involve us being much more in touch with one another. But I think it would be great if we could say at the end of the session, like 75% of Kentucky legislators like heard about this issue.
Yeah, this definitely isn't the last time you're going to hear from us about these issues. So we'll definitely be doing some more strategy planning like Robin's talking about in the beginning of January when session begins. There's also a break in the middle of January to the beginning of February in the legislative session. So we'll be doing some more huddling and creation of materials and those kinds of things then. So there will be a General Assembly training that's really going to focus in on this year. So definitely sign up for that training if you haven't already. There's also a live Spanish translation of that training if you know any partners or if you would be interested in that. So yeah, lots more information coming from us. If you haven't signed up for the email, that's a great way to get updates from us on all of this. I think that's all I have. Robin, is there anything else you need to close us out?
I will send out all of the links from the chat. The slides, the recording will be available on YouTube. You can also see the other 2 trainings we've already done there as well. And I'll also include some follow-up about that additional General Assembly training you were talking about. So yeah, we would love for you to share that. We will have the promotional materials in English and Spanish as well. So please forward those to anybody you can think of who may have not had access to participate in this type of advocacy before.
Well, thank you all so much for being here.
Robin, real quick, are there any more trainings in this training series?
There are. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Tyler, who happens to be facilitating the next one. 1 week from today at 10 a.m. again, Tyler will be leading us through a training on fundraising for advocacy. So if you are with a nonprofit or a community action group, this is an ideal training for you.
Yeah, it's one of those issues that we always talk about, and it underpins a lot of our work. So we wanted to create some intentional space. And we'll be joined by Maggie Smith. Ooh, they just got married and their name's hyphenated. I will remember that before we have a training together.
I will send that information too, because I know her name is on the promo image.
But we're going to dig into, specifically within the food space, but these skills are transferable across any type of development or fundraising work. And we'll try and talk about, what do engaging individuals to give, but also all the way up to, how do you convince a foundation with a $2 billion endowment to give you a bunch of money? So hopefully we'll cover a lot of ground, and excited to close out our training series on it.
And if you haven't seen any of Tyler's slides before, I don't know if you or your co-facilitator are making them, but they will have random animals and sassiness and fun things in them. Everybody enjoyed the duck that appeared on a slideshow.
I am very serious about being unserious. We've got to bring some levity to these conversations.
Awesome. Well, last call for questions or comments. All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here, and I will send out the follow-up to this by Monday at the latest.